this is Carmen Turner-Schott, and welcome to Deep Soul Divers Astrology. I am your host, and I am here to welcome an author and friend of mine. Her name is Nancy Reed. We met through a women's entrepreneurship, and it was interesting, Nancy, when I first saw you and your book, I felt she's got to have some Virgo in her chart, and I don't know anything about you, right? And I asked you to send me your birth information, and I thought just the title of your book itself to me was very Virgo. And you have the moon, your emotional nature, in the sign of Virgo, which is the sign of perfectionism, the sign, right? The sign of health, and very much an analyzer and someone that wants to be perfect. You know, Virgos are known to be hard on themselves. So I'm really interested to talk to you and kind of, you know, bring your chart into it a little bit and talk about your new book. And I'll go ahead and just read a little bit of your bio, and then I'll let you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and your spiritual path. So Nancy Reed, sacred embodiment coach, author, intuitive healer, Pilates instructor, spiritual life coach, and student teacher, facilitator of A Course in Miracles, is a San Francisco Bay Area native that calls La La Land home for nearly a decade. She's recently wrote a book called Happily Ever Now, Not After Everything Else is Perfect. And it's a gentle guide for overcoming the paralysis of perfectionism by embracing our inner guidance, our innate guidance. So I loved, you know, when I got the book, I thought, wow, this is very much, I resonate with it. As I'm a Virgo sun. Today is actually my birthday. And so I was looking at your chart, and I'm like, I knew it. You know, you're a Virgo moon. So we're sun moon flipped. So inside emotionally, you have Virgo personality traits. And then your sun sign is Gemini, which, guess what, is the writer, the communicator, the teacher. So all these things you're doing, and you're an 8th house sun, which is all of my research is about 8th house people. You're a Phoenix. So we can talk a little bit about that as we go. But, you know, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and just, you know, your spiritual path and how you kind of came about where you are today?
Oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And I am so excited to have this conversation with you, Carmen, because I've always been intrigued about astrology, but I've never connected with anybody to actually dive into this. And maybe the perfectionism kept me from trying to do it on my own, which is pretty funny. And my father, his birthday is actually tomorrow. And he's a Virgo. And I've always wondered why he and I kind of butt heads, and yet we also are so much alike too. And so this is fascinating.
You are alike. His outer identity is how you are inside. So it's like, and the vice versa. It's like you're a mirror to each other, you know, in a lot of ways.
That is fascinating. So yeah, I mean, my whole life, I was that little kid that would like go with my mom, bless her heart. And I would go into like an ice cream store or something with her. And I'd be like, Mom, why is that little girl so sad? And she's like, what do you mean sad? She's in the ice cream store. She's not sad, you know? And then eventually, after me saying this a few times, she was like, okay, I guess I'll go check in. And so she like went up to the family and she was like, I know this is kind of a little weird, but did something bad happen today or something sad? And they're like, oh yeah, we had to put our dog down. And we were trying so hard to think of what would, you know, lift up our little girl's just life and bring a smile back to her. And she and her dog had shared like an ice cream cone or something like that before. And it was just the sweetest thing. And so my mom, after that, she was like, maybe there's something to these little feelings that you're having. And yet nobody else really in my family had that experience. And so I felt pretty weird. And I wanted to be normal, and I wanted to be perfect, right? And so even as a little girl, so I did my best to blend in. I did my best to want to be invisible. In fact, I remember in middle school, we had to write an essay about like, if I was a superhero, this is the superpower I would have. And everyone chose flying for some reason. I still remember that. And I chose invisibility. Did you really? And it was, I found the essay the other day actually with my mom, and it was so funny because I saw like how much I thought, well, if I'm invisible, then nobody can judge me. And I don't have to worry about being perfect. And also
Yeah.
that I can have all of these experiences that I was having that were so different from any of my friends, like having these really lucid dreams, having people come
Mhm.
up to me on the street. I still remember in San Francisco when I was a little girl, and this woman came up when I was walking with my dad, and she was like, "Oh, your aura, you have this like aura about you. You're supposed to heal people." And I was like, "What?
Uh-huh.
I'm like 7. Like, no,
Uh-huh.
I just want to be a little girl." And
Oh,
so it was that
wow.
same thing. So I've always been, I guess you would say, the reluctant healer, the reluctant spiritual, the reluctant intuitive.
Wow.
And, it really took some pretty life altering events
Yeah.
to have that shift for me where I nearly died. And I've had several near death experiences.
Wow. I want to hear about
And
this.
yeah, and so,
This is
so
this is
I literally,
cool. This is your
I
eighth
li-
this is your
go
eighth
ahead.
house. This is your eighth house. I was going to ask you, but since you brought it up, I'm careful how I bring it up. But when I pulled your chart up, I thought that you have had a connection with death because you
Mhm.
have the sun and Venus and Mercury all in the house of death, rebirth, transformation, and healing. And people, I've been doing this a long time, and everyone I've met has either had a near death experience or lost someone close to them at a young age, or they were connected to death and dying in some way, dreaming about it, knowing when it would
Mhm.
happen. So you're an eighth houser. And I'm really interested in this. I researched this house. So you're validating my research right now, just telling me about this. So I just can't wait to hear more. I mean, this is amazing. Yeah.
So I remember when I was probably about, 15, 16, I had a surgery. And during the surgery, I got really scared beforehand. And so my blood pressure shot up much higher than what it
Oh
had
no.
been when they had
Okay.
been measuring it beforehand. So they weren't expecting that. So they had to give me a lot more anesthesia.
Oh,
And I guess that made it really hard for me to wake up. And so when they were trying to wake me up, I wasn't waking up.
oh
And
my.
what I remember is being like in the hospital bed in the room, and then I was like above, and I could see everything that was happening, and I could see them trying to wake me up. It was the weirdest thing.
Out
And
of
I couldn't
body.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I couldn't say anything. I couldn't anything, but like I'd had really lucid dreams before in my
Mhm.
childhood. So
Yeah.
I kind of thought that was the same sort of thing that was happening. And then afterwards, when I finally did wake up, and I remember asking them, I'm like, did you try to do, X, Y, or Z? Like, did you come over my shoulder? Were you tapping it? Were you, and they were like, yes. Like,
Oh,
how,
wow.
how do you know that? And I was like, I saw, and
Wow.
then, but again, I wanted to be invisible, right? So I was like, okay,
Mhm.
I just won't say anything about this. And so then I went on through life and I did my best to blend in the background. I was a cheerleader in school, I was involved in student government, like all these different things. And
Yeah,
yet I
sure.
always had this curiosity. I
Yeah.
always was looking for like, what are things for? What is the
Yeah.
purpose? And
Yeah.
where's my place in this world? Because I felt like I wasn't really supposed to be here in a way. Like I used to
Wow.
ask my mom when I was a
Yeah.
little girl, I would say, "Can you put me back inside? Like
I
I
know.
just want to go back inside."
You
Because
weren't from Earth. You weren't
no,
from here.
I just
Yeah.
I didn't feel like it was my home. And I felt
Yeah.
like that there was something else I was connected to in my dreams. And I
Yeah.
even saw these like almost like glitter like particles come down from the ceiling. And I talk about this in my book when I was a
Oh
little
man.
girl when my parents were going through a divorce.
Yeah.
And I saw these sparkles, as I called them, and they
Yeah.
came and they offered me comfort from all my nightmares.
Oh, how amazing.
And so I mean, I've had all these different experiences. And then when I was out of college and I had broken up with a boyfriend that I was really serious about, and I was dating this other guy that was like literally our second or third date practically, and he'd been drinking and I didn't know it. And by this
Mm.
point, I had done a really good job at tuning out and basically muting my
Yeah.
innate guidance, my intuition, my
Yeah.
inner voice, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
But it tried. It
Oh yeah.
tried to break through and to tell me not to get in the car to go
Mm.
out before a drive for before dinner. He wanted to impress me.
Oh wow.
And I heard that voice so clearly saying, "Don't go. Don't go." And I thought, well, that
Mm.
can't be right. I mean, this is just a little drive and he's so cute. And like I want him
Yeah.
to like me, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
want to be perfect. And
Yes.
and so I got in the car. And then as soon as we were in the car, I knew I'd made a mistake because he was going faster and faster and
Oh
faster. And I
no.
remember like asking him to slow down. And he was like, yeah, babe, as soon as I get around this corner, let me show you what this baby can do. And he like,
Oh,
like it spun out basically. And so the car fishtailed because then he hit the brakes and the tires were kind of bald. And I didn't know that either.
oh no.
And, so the car starts spinning around and we're on this 2-directional lane road, but it's only a 1-lane actual driving road. And so like, cars can come either way, but there's really
Yeah.
only space for one. And so I'm thinking we're going to hit somebody
Yeah.
that's coming around the other side. So thank goodness
Oh,
nobody was coming the other direction. But as the
wow.
car started spinning and going over the edge of this basically cliff in the dark, and
Wow.
so no cell phone reception because we were out in the middle of nowhere, and all this, it was like
Oh,
a commuter's bypass basically that he had taken
scary.
me to.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And so we're going over the edge, and this time that voice speaks up again. And this time I did listen. And
Good.
it said, push up. And I was like, push up. And I just felt like my hand like push up on the roof of the car. And what that did was it sort of wedged me in the seat and in the car so that I didn't hit the dashboard and I didn't
Oh,
go out the
wow.
windshield because
Oh,
it was an old-fashioned sports car and it wasn't a self-adjusting seatbelt. And the
oh,
person that had ridden in it before me was much larger, like one of his coworkers or something like that.
oh, geez.
And so if I hadn't listened to that, I don't know what would have happened, something terrible
Oh,
probably.
Nancy. Oh my gosh. That's amazing. You're right. It's interesting how, we kind of doubt that inner voice when
Mhm.
until something happens, and after many times of not listening, sometimes something very tragic happens, or we
Yeah.
wake up, and unfortunately, sometimes that's how our angels and guides, I believe, get us to trust our own self, and
Mhm.
that connection we have to God and the universe and our spirit, our higher self. We tend to doubt it because we're not raised to believe in these things. We're not raised to, your story resonates with me a lot. When I was little, the same thing. You were an empath, and
Mhm.
you felt people's pain, and that's
Mhm.
eighth house energy. I have a lot of eighth house too, and it's funny because we had a lot of ladies that were part of that group that we did.
Mhm.
But I was so drawn to you. There was something, I knew there was something about you that was similar to me. And then I pulled your chart up and I just laughed because you got eighth and 12th house. So I knew, and I thought I got to ask her. And I love to hear this. And you are meant to be a healer, and you feel people's the undercurrents going on in the environment from a
Mhm.
young age. Eighth house people feel things, they sense things, they feel like they're not from earth, they feel like they're adopted, they ask their parents, I'm not from here. I mean, I hear this from thousands of people. So you're just validating my experience as a son in the eighth house person. And I just kind of know when someone has eighth house, and you do. So you're meant to be that deep transforming experiences. I mean, physical death, emotional rebirths, emotional deaths, transforming your mind, your beliefs. All of those changes are part of who you are, and these experiences. I'm sure you have many more
Oh yeah,
experiences.
no, I have so many.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so what was really interesting about this one was that as we were going over the edge of the cliff and I was bracing
Oh,
myself in the car,
oh my.
all I saw in front of me, like people talk about near-death experiences that
Mm.
they see their life flash before them. I
Wow,
never
yeah.
have had that happen. What
Okay.
I did see was any instance of unforgiveness or
Oh,
unkindness in a relationship between me and someone else, whether it was intentional or not. That's what I saw. Were like hurt
wow.
feelings or, things like, and it was just
Oh,
all like almost like
wow.
a movie, like, just came across like a single strip of film or something.
Oh,
And I'm watching
wow.
all of it happen. And I'm like, why am I being shown this? Like, what is
Hmm.
this trying to show me? And why am I being shown this when I think I'm going to die? Like, I literally thought
Wow.
we were going to die.
Yes.
And so we go over the edge and the car just kind of like soars. And luckily it set a low
Wow.
center of gravity, so it didn't flip. So we just
Oh,
landed at the bottom of this like deep ravine.
oh
And
my.
all this dirt came down with us as the car went down with such force.
Oh my
And the
gosh.
window was down. So I was literally buried. And I
Oh,
thought
Nancy.
that I had died.
Oh
And
my gosh.
I was just like, okay, am I alive? Is the car gonna blow up? Am I dead? Like what
Oh
is
my.
happening? Why was I shown that? And what was the last thing I was
Yes.
shown? And then I heard another voice again, my little inner voice that was now getting a little louder. And she said,
Wow.
get out. And so I got out.
You're like,
So
I'm
I
gonna
got
listen.
so I got out of the car. I crawled out the window
Holy
through the
cow.
dirt and everything. So I'm covered in dirt from head to toe. I look like somebody that
Wow.
came out of a grave. And
Oh,
I'm like crawling up through the, just the moonlight shining down because it was in the fall.
yes.
And I was crawling up to the surface. And I guess the guy by that point also he was relaxed because he's been
Sure.
drinking. So he got
Sure.
out of the car and he's coming up behind me and I'm
Wow.
crawling and I'm trying to grab on anything I can. And it turns out that I grab onto poison oak. And so
Oh,
on top of everything else, I get this like systemic reaction to poison oak that I'd never had
oh,
before. So
oh
that
no.
comes later. But I'm crawling up and then all of a sudden I see these headlights. So kind of like what you were saying about, I see these
Yes.
headlights come around the corner of this
Oh,
huge white truck and this burly, just like bellowing voice breaks the silence. And he says, "Are you okay? Is
oh
everything all
wow.
right? Like what happened?" And I'm like, "We were in a car accident. I'm trying to get
Oh
up to the
wow.
surface, but I don't think I can go any further or whatever." Because I was just on adrenaline at that
Yes.
point. I didn't know I'd been
Wow.
hurt in any way, shape, or form.
Wow.
And he was like, "You've got to reach up." And I was like, "I can't. It's too far. I'm gonna fall if
Yeah.
I've done everything I can to get this far." And he's
Yes.
like, "Well, I can't reach over and get you." He's like, "You have to reach up." And I'm like, "No." And he said, and I still remember these words to this day, and this is the transformation, was he
Wow.
said, "I've got you, baby girl. Sometimes in life you need to let go in order to be saved."
Oh my gosh.
And
That's
so I
so
took this deep breath and I just reached up
wow.
with all of my might, leap of faith,
Oh
and
wow.
he grabbed me and brought me up to the surface.
Oh my
And it
gosh.
turned out that he was like literally an angel because he was
Yes.
down as a contractor doing some work in that area, wasn't meant to be driving through there.
Oh
There's
wow.
two guys were in the car together and they saw me and my hair in the headlights and they thought I was like a deer. But then
Oh
they
my.
realized the deer was wearing clothing and they're like, "Oh, okay, well, this can't be a deer." And
Oh
so
my
so they
gosh.
stopped and so they helped the guy up too. And so we got to the surface and they waited with
Oh
us until we got a tow truck to come and then they disappeared.
wow.
And in all of the,
Oh
just adrenaline, I
wow.
never got their name. I never got to say thank you enough.
Wow.
And it turned out that I had separated my right AC joint. I had twisted my whole
Oh.
thoracic spine. I had poison oak later to show
Oh.
up,
Oh
and
Nancy.
all these things.
Oh
And yet I couldn't shake that memory of what I'd been shown when I
yeah.
thought that nothing was going to go on beyond that moment. And so
Wow.
that's what inspired me to start writing and journaling.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. I can't even explain. So, could they have been angels? I mean, did he see them?
Well, that's a good question. Gosh, it's been so long. I don't remember him having a conversation with them specifically, but I
Wow.
definitely, I know, I mean, I can kind of still remember, I remember his voice more than anything else. And I
Wow.
remember the truck, but
Wow.
I don't remember specifically where they went or like why they didn't
Wow.
stay beyond a certain time. They
Wow.
were just gone.
Wow. So right after that happened, what was your journey like after that?
So my journey was that I was having these horrible nightmares. I'd always been a
Mhm.
lucid dreamer, but I
Oh yeah.
had really bad PTSD
Yeah.
where I kept seeing the accident replay
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
and over and over again in different outcomes. So it was like me dying,
Oh,
me having different drivers in the driving seat.
yes.
Then it was my face in the driving seat, and I was
Yes.
like, and so
Oh, oh
and
yes.
then, but I felt this call to write. It was really weird.
Yeah.
And I'd been given this
Yeah.
journal like a few weeks before the accident, and it was
Yeah.
called Awaken from the Dream Within.
Oh wow.
And so I opened it up and I started writing. And the
Good
first
for
thing I
you.
wrote was called The Instant is All There Is. And it just flowed out from me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like there was any pausing or anything. But what I noticed was when I was writing, I wasn't hurting and I wasn't scared and I wasn't
Oh,
thinking
yeah.
about that I was still down at the bottom of that cliff, basically,
Yes. Yes.
and so I kept writing. And then after about 2 months or so of doing that, I
Yeah.
shared my writings with my mother. And I said, "Hey, I've been doing this and I don't know why, but I feel like I should show it with you, share it with
Yeah.
you."
Nice.
And she was like, "Okay." And so she was reading it. Well, so I grew up in a household with my mom after my parents got divorced mostly. And I saw my dad kind of like on the weekends and
Mm.
vacations and things like that. But my mom had been a teacher and a student of A Course in Miracles for
Oh,
as long
nice.
as I can remember, but I'd never opened the book. So it
Mhm.
was kind of like the people would come to our house and me wanting to be invisible. The last thing I wanted to do was to have anyone
Yes.
see me and possibly think that I was one of them or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I hid upstairs and I remember being like, Mom, what do I tell people you do? You have people come to your house every week? Like, this is weird. Like,
Yeah.
and everything. And she's like, yeah, but it makes me a better person. And she's like,
Yeah.
and it's not about anyone else reading it. And she's like, you never have to read this book. And so I was like, always curious about that. I was like,
Yeah.
well, that's interesting. This is different. Some of the other spiritual paths I've heard about and things where people
Sure.
try to make you become one of them or,
Yeah.
read the book. And yet
Sure.
she was telling me, no, you don't have to ever read it. So after me doing this writing and showing it to her, she was like, would it be okay if I shared this with another friend of mine? And I said, okay. So she shared it with her friend, who
Nice.
turns out that she was working with Ken Wapnick, who was the original teacher of A Course in Miracles.
Oh, nice.
And she shared with him my journals. And he, out of the blue, called me up probably a couple weeks
Nice.
later. And he was like, hey, I'm Ken Wapnick. I've read your journal. It's
Nice.
beautiful. And he's like, what do you think about all this? And I was like, I don't know. I just know that when I'm
Yeah.
writing, it doesn't hurt as much. And he said, okay,
Yeah.
so you're coming at this from pain. And he said,
Mhm.
and that's okay. He was very gentle about it. And he
Nice.
said, but if you want to have somebody who gets where you're coming from and understands more of this, I'm happy to be that for you. So
Oh,
here's my
nice.
number. You can call me anytime. You can share with me anything you're writing. Don't force it. Don't make a big deal about it.
Sure.
Don't take it all too seriously.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
said, and above all, do not read A Course in Miracles while you are writing this. And so I was like, okay. And I just trusted
Wow.
him from day one. And
Sure.
and so, he kind of became my mentor and my second father in so many ways.
Nice.
And then that went on for another few months. And then he called me up again. And I'd been calling him here and there with different writing, journal entries and things. And
Yeah.
he said, okay, today's the day. He said, do you
Yeah.
want to read the book, Course in Miracles? And I
Mm-hmm.
said, sure, I'm curious about it. And he said, okay,
Sure.
go pick it up and open up to any page. He's like, it'll always be the
Sure.
right page, whatever you open up to. So I just opened the book and I opened up to this section called The Forgotten Psalm, which is about us remembering the truth of us, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm reading through it, I'm like, well, that's interesting. This is kind of similar to what I've been writing. And he said, yes, because truth is truth. And he
Oh,
said,
neat.
you might be writing it in a different form, but it's coming from that same place. And he
Yeah.
said, so now you get to have a choice. Do you just keep writing, or do you want to integrate your writing and actually really live it and
Yeah.
experience it yourself? And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. And he said, well, I'd love to meet you. So if you would like to come, I'm teaching a class coming up, and come on to the
Sure.
class and I'll talk to you, and you don't have to do any of this, but if
Sure.
this feels like it's something you want to do, then this is what you can do. And so
Nice.
I went down there, I met him, we had this immediate connection. He did feel like a second father to me,
Nice.
and he became my mentor in all things and all ways until
Nice.
he passed away in 2013.
Oh, that's a great story. That's amazing. It's so nice to have, well, everyone we meet is for a reason, when the time is right. Everyone we know now, we're meant to be in their lives, and connect. And it's interesting because when you were talking about seeing the different flashes of relationships or unforgiveness, or that was what you saw, it reminds me, of Dolores. I've read a lot of Dolores Cannon's work, and
Mm,
I just literally saw a video this week on YouTube or something, a snapshot of her talking about that. That's why all of us keep coming back, is to
mm.
heal. And it's all about forgiveness. Everything, why we keep
Mhm,
coming back into this body and spirit, is to forgive. She's like, don't be angry with anyone, forgive everyone. It was this video, and I'm like, wow. And so what you said just really resonated, that was your life review. They call it a life
mhm,
review. I've read a lot of books like Embraced by the Light, Saved by the Light. When I was in high school, I was very interested in near death experiences and all these things. And and I always wondered, what would it be like? And so it's interesting. Everyone experiences it a little differently. I've had some
Mhm.
friends that died and came back, and they saw a light, and similar, like they saw people that they needed to work on or forgive,
Mhm.
and let things go. And it's kind of, I mean, I believe that some of this is from the past lives as well, that comes back, that we're working these things out this life. And so,
Yeah, because if time is more holographic than linear,
mhm,
then anything we're healing now, we're
mhm,
healing intergenerationally too.
yes,
And, throughout the different identities. And Ken used to
yes.
say that he believed that I had left early in all my previous lifetimes, and that
Oh,
this lifetime
yeah,
was a choice to
yes.
see if it was possible to hang in there
Wow.
versus get out, and he
Yes.
said that all of this ambiguity that I had about being here,
Mhm.
that was what was behind these near death experiences, was me believing that I had to have one foot in and one foot out, that I couldn't have both feet in and still be connected to that truth, to that memory
Yeah.
of something bigger, basically, and beyond, and
Yeah.
have that spirituality. And he said that if I chose to hang in there this time, and to choose to have both feet in and yet be in it but not of it, that I could be extraordinarily helpful to others that were struggling with the same sorts of things, that were not believing
Nice.
in their possibilities and their hope.
Yes.
But again, it was my choice and it was never going to be forced.
Wow, I love that. And I'm looking at here. I had some questions I wanted to ask you. Um, so with perfectionism, I'm seeing, you've got a Virgo moon. And now as a Virgo, how it how we always, like, a perfectionist, like, have, like, hard on yourself, because I find that people with Virgo sun and moon, that we tend to be hardest on ourselves.
Absolutely, I was, and I
Hmm.
always was comparing myself to, like, my older brother, who seemed to
Yeah.
have everything come easy to him and be
Yeah.
athletic and smart and everything, and I was like, "Well, if he has a 3.9, I better get a 4.0." Or
Sure.
if, because I wanted to be enough.
Yeah.
And my father grew up in Hungary, in Budapest, and
Oh.
was very, very, very poor, and through
Oh.
extraordinary means was able to
Oh.
escape and start a new life for himself here. And I think that he brought a lot of his ideas about women's place, women's role,
Mm.
women's everything. And he didn't quite know what to do with this little
Sure.
girl who wanted to sell pumpkins as, an elementary school student,
Wow.
because I wanted to have my own business and I wanted
Yeah.
to make money for
Yeah.
Christmas. And so he always had thought that he was going to pass on his
Yeah.
entrepreneurial business, his own company. He started all these things on his
Wow.
own, to my brother, because that's the
Mhm.
son, right? And yet
Mhm.
I was the one that was like, "Dad, see me, see me, see me." And I
Yeah.
thought, well, if I could just be perfect enough,
Yeah.
then I'll be worth it for him to stay home more, or to spend
Yeah.
time with me, or to invest
Yeah.
in my cheerleading practice as much as he's invested in my brother's other sports, that were
Sure.
not so masculine and everything else. And,
Yeah.
so I was always trying to be more, and I was believing that I was responsible for people's health, happiness, and unhappiness. And so,
Yeah.
that if they were unhappy, it was something I had done, and
Yeah.
that if they were happy, then I'd
Mhm.
finally been able to walk on enough eggshells and contort myself into enough chameleon versions of myself
Mhm.
that I got them to be happy too. So there was always that
Mhm.
sense of, I can't be vulnerable. I
Yeah.
can't tell anybody who I
Yeah.
really am. They're going
Yeah.
to run for the hills and tar and feather me and burn me at the stake. And I had lots of dreams, actually, of being
Mhm.
like a high priestess or different things in the
Sure.
past, and having
Sure.
people betray me, and all those
Yes.
archetypes
Oh,
and
yeah.
everything.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and I definitely have had that play out in this life, where I
Sure.
thought, well, if I'm really myself,
Yeah.
how are people going to react?
Yeah.
And what if they think I'm a fraud? Like, how
Yeah.
do I explain these things that I know, that I wasn't taught,
Yeah.
that I just know them?
Yeah.
Like, when I worked with people in Pilates with rehab, I could see them and I would know where their pain was. I could see
Yeah.
them and know the question to ask them about the emotional piece that
Yeah.
tied into their physical pain. And
Yeah.
I couldn't explain it. And I had doctors as clients and nurses and, different people. And they'd be like, did you go to medical school? Like, how do you know all this? And I'd be like,
Yeah.
"Ugh." And then I'd get scared and I'd be like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
they're going to think I'm a fraud. They're going to think I'm, something else, when all it was coming from was wanting to be helpful and wanting to
Yes.
be of service and
Yes.
wanting to offer a different option for people that were in
Mhm.
pain, because I had been in so much physical pain and
Yes.
emotional and spiritual pain.
Yes.
And kindness and curiosity, which are the
Mhm.
foundations of all of my work,
Yeah.
and gentleness, that had actually been what was the key to undoing all of that perfectionism, which is
Yeah.
perfectly imperfect, because
Yes.
perfectionism doesn't get cured. It's
Yes.
just different shades of it. But
Yes.
now when I recognize the perfectionism wanting to speak, I'm more gentle to it. I don't judge it.
Yeah.
And I see it as serving a purpose, that it's trying to help me in some way or protect me in some way. And so I express gratitude to it. And then I'm able to let go of it and to invite that curiosity much easier.
That's wonderful. And I'm looking here, there's so much, you shared so much. So, how has your life transformed the most since choosing to live your own happily ever now? Living
Well,
in the present.
yeah, no kidding. And that was the thing, is that everyone's always waiting. They're waiting for that after. They're waiting
Mhm.
for their happily ever to come at some point after, when they've
Mm.
checked off all the boxes, when the world has said they're enough, when they have enough letters after their name, when somebody with more followers than them gave them a like, whatever it was that they're waiting for.
Yeah.
And all you're doing is you're just running as fast as you can to stay in place, to borrow from
Yeah.
Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
And really it's coming from a place of fear. And really it's
Yeah.
coming from that belief that doesn't get talked about a lot. And I talk about this in my
Mhm.
book with
Yeah.
perfectionism,
Yeah.
is that there's this very kind of silly belief now, but at the time, very serious, that if I give away my choices and my power of decision making to someone or something outside of me,
Mhm.
then it means I'm off the hook for the outcome.
Mhm.
Because now I get to stay perfect. I get to be like, well, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
It was this
Yeah.
person and they were the expert and I did
Uh-huh.
everything they said and I'm the little face of innocence here. And, I'm no, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no. I never would have done this. I knew that
Sure.
this wasn't the right thing to do. My intuition told me not to, but this person was
Yes.
more powerful than me. This person had more, clout than me. This person, whatever
Yeah.
it is. But then really where it's coming from is that we don't think we're on the hook for it then. We
Yeah.
think that we can say something outside of us made that choice, when we do make a choice when we do that, which is to be indecisive. And
Yeah.
that is a choice. And that's been one of the most healing realizations for me, is
Yeah.
to look at that gently and to see all the times that I gave away my power and that I still
Mhm.
do sometimes when I get
I know.
triggered.
Yeah.
And, and to recognize that I was just that scared little girl that didn't want to be seen,
Yes.
that was the
Yes.
invisibility that I wanted, and everything. And oh, it's
Yes.
still there. Okay, well, if it's still there in me, then it's probably still there in somebody else that needs to hear this message today. And
Sure.
so I'm going to talk about it, and I'm not going to hide it anymore. And I'm not
Yeah.
going to believe that it's not ever going to be enough
Yeah.
for me to be anything other than perfect, and so this idea of perfectly imperfect, oh my gosh, it's like a breath of fresh air. That's the
Yeah.
transformation, is that
Yeah.
everything becomes possible. And that's the question I ask people
Yeah.
all the time, is, well, what's possible when you fully believe that nothing is impossible?
Yeah.
And the answer is everything, right?
Yeah.
And so now you take all the limits off, you take all the judgments, you take all the comparison, all the shame and the blame and
Mhm.
everything else, and you just focus on being in the present. Because when you're
Yeah.
focused on perfectionism, you're not being present.
Yeah. That's so true. It's really interesting because, with the eighth house sun, I always say that, it's the most resilient place to have your main identity. So to me, I can see you're a very resilient person. I mean, you just from what you shared with the two stories, and there's many more, I'm sure,
Yes.
with near death experience. It really is about, when you're younger, hiding, because it's the
Mhm.
house of secrets and hidden
Mhm.
things. So your identity is the sun sign. And so you really hid your abilities, hid who you were. But what happens is we're kind of forced out into the real world. And even that story you shared, I wrote about it in my Phoenixes and Angels book that just came out about eighth house people. You're an eighth houser. And in some of the stories, like when you were with your dad and someone came up to you and said that to you, when eighth house people are in public, people come up and share their problems. They share, like someone, like they'll come up to you and tell you the deepest, darkest taboo secrets about themselves. And then you end up giving them counseling in the grocery store aisle, right? That's what happened to me my whole life. And I can see that similar energy with you, that people were drawn to you to share their pain. And that's your gift as an eighth house person, is to heal others, because you've walked in their shoes, you've lived it. And that makes the best counselors or healers, because you know what it's like, because you've been, like you said, you felt pain, you had things you went through physically, emotionally. And so you become what I call a wounded healer, a phoenix that rises from the ashes, right? And this energy of change and rebirth is going to be, throughout your life. And I'm the same way. I have it happens to me a lot, but you're meant to write, definitely, as a Gemini rules the third house of publishing, writing, journaling, teaching, sharing knowledge, talking, radio shows, all this stuff. And I have the same thing. So that's why, I'm doing this too. So there was something about you that I just naturally was drawn to you in your book with perfectionism, because it's something I've struggled with too. I have a lot of Virgo, a stellium in Virgo. And so, it's like you can get 1,000 compliments, and it's like that one person that doesn't like you, that one negative YouTube comment that is horrible. And I had to learn, and I'm still learning it. Like it's a daily practice of I cannot take it personal and let it go, because you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and that's a lady told me that once. So I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I like that. That's true. But I always wanted to be everybody's cup of tea. I wanted everybody to like me. And I would get very hurt. And what did I do wrong? What did I say or do? You kind of blame yourself, and it's not us. We can't control other people. And that's what I had to learn, that we can only control our reactions and ourself and our own reaction to how people treat us. And I always try to be kind and generous and compassionate, but sometimes you're going to have people that are going to be hurtful, and you got to let it roll off, just like roll it off your back, and you got to keep going, and you got to focus on the 100 positive comments that you got.
I know.
Right?
I'm just laughing when you're saying this, because it's my entire life. You just said, basically, I can still remember the like red ink on this one teacher's papers that she used to like.
Yes, I know.
And I'd be like, but no, I can't have an A-. I have to have an A. Like, I know. And she would always say the same thing too. She would say, I don't feel like you're sharing enough about yourself. That, you have all of the information, you have all of, but it was like a creative writing thing, or something. And I'd be like, but I'm the best essay writer. I'm, all these, I read the book, I read the other book, I all these other things. And it was always like the vulnerability. And the same thing with acting. Like I always thought about maybe doing acting. And so I tried when I lived in LA, because enough clients kept asking me, are you going to try? And I did, but I couldn't get past the perfectionism, because I would memorize everything so well. And then I'd be waiting for the other person to do their line or for whatever. And the teachers would be like, gosh, you're really emotional, and I can tell that you're trying to be present, but I can tell you're trying to be present. And I can tell that you're indicating, I can tell that you're waiting, you're not responding. He's like, when I talk to you just here in class, you're responsive. You're in the moment. He's like, you need to carry that into your scripts. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that.
I know, right?
It was too vulnerable. It was too anything else. So maybe I would do it differently now. But But
Sure.
yeah, I really have found that speaking, being on podcasts and doing
Yeah.
all of that too has been so healing for me with writing
Yeah.
this book as well,
Yeah.
because it really was letting go of
Yeah.
needing to be perfect and instead
Yes.
showing up and having the tech issues, having the,
Yes.
you know, the kid crying in the background, having whatever it is, and just
Yes.
going on and being like, oh, well, if things are
Yeah.
supposed to be quote unquote perfectly imperfect, then I can never
Yeah.
fail. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, tonight, for instance, it happens to people like us because the universe is testing us like, okay, guys,
I
you're
know.
not going to be able to control the plan everything because you and I were planning. I was
Yep.
texting you earlier. I double checked. Here's the Zoom. Make sure.
Yep.
And sometimes it doesn't matter. The universe is going to throw a little wrench in there, and it's meant to happen. And you got to roll with it. And it took me a long time. I mean, I just turned 48 today. Oh my gosh! And I look back, and I'm still at times I'm a lot better. I have a lot thicker skin now, but it's being having Virgo energy, and a lot of the Virgos listening out there, they'll know it makes you that's your natural thing is I analyze, I
Mm-hmm.
prepare, I organize, I'm efficient, I'm always looking to help others, but they're also have high standards for themselves. They Virgos want to be perfect, and emotionally your moon is in Virgo, so Virgos are afraid of being emotionally vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
They're more doers, like doing practical service for people, doing things for others, helping them when they're sick, teaching, talking, communication, knowledge. We love to learn and teach. So you were great
Mm-hmm.
with, doing the research part of things and in school and all that and acting. But then when it comes to emotions, it takes a little bit more for us to feel safe
Mm-hmm.
to show our inner, because we are sensitive. It's earth energy, and Virgos get a bad rap that they're cold. They're not. They're very sensitive, but they're afraid of being hurt,
Mm-hmm.
and they're hardest on themselves. They already know all their faults and all of their things that are wrong with them. I'm like, you don't have to tell me. I know, and it's hard for them to take compliments. That used to be
Yes.
really hard for me to ever take a compliment.
Without
And I
returning it or like
Yeah.
reciprocating, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I don't know, it just naturally was something that I had to work on. And people would end up telling me, listen, when we give you a compliment, just say thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'd say, oh
Mm-hmm.
no, no, we're no, very modest. Oh no, I know. And I stopped doing that because people would say, you need to take a compliment, just say thank you. And I would say, thank you. It was hard to get used to that. Now I'm like, thank you. And I do mean it. And I feel like, oh, they were so sweet, but it took me a while to be comfortable taking compliments. And it was just all my Virgo, this,
Mm.
perfectionist thing. And so I'm still organized, and I still like to be on early, 30 minutes early. I'm never, and I worry before I do anything. I'm a
Mm.
worrier. I don't know about you, but that worry is part to me. I feel like just talking to you, that worry is connected with being perfect
Mm-hmm.
because, you want everything to go right. And I had
Yeah,
to
and you think
realize,
of all the different, worst case scenarios, and you think you have it all planned, and
yes.
then
I mean, really, I think about everything that could happen or go wrong. And I even have something planned tomorrow, and I'm worried to death about it. And I'm like, we'll figure it out. If
yeah.
it doesn't work, I'm doing a YouTube live, and I haven't really done that before, and I'm scared it won't work. But, I'll have tech issues, I'm just trying to plan out, and I'm Googling how to go live once you schedule a YouTube, and all these things. And some people are opposite of that, and I meet people, and I'm just amazed because they have no care in the world. They don't plan. They
That's my
just
husband.
they wing it, right? And yeah, and they're just like going with the flow, And I'm like, man, I wish I could be like you. I wish I could just not that I say I wish I didn't care. I say that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. I wish I didn't care so much.
Mm-hmm.
But now I know, what, I'm born this way. I've accepted that I care, and it's never good. I'm never not going to care about
Mm-hmm.
doing a good job, or doing things, getting things done right, and being conscientious. We have our personality, and that's why, astrology has validated my personality, and I love it. And so I use it as a personality tool, in counseling and things like that. But I love, thank you for sharing your chart with me, because it's been really, it's validated a lot of my research that I'm doing right now about the eighth house connection with death, and rebirth and transformation, and your stories are just amazing of what you've been through, and very resilient
Well,
person.
thank
And
you. That was so fascinating to hear and to read about the chart too. I mean, like I've never had such an in-depth
yeah,
analysis of it. And
yeah,
it's like, oh my gosh, there really
yeah.
is something here.
Yes, yes, it's amazing. I mean, you're meant to be a healer and meant to help people with what you've experienced in your life, and everything you're doing. I can see in your chart, it's just validated, and you're on the right path. And I'm wondering, like, how would you like a reader to feel after reading your book? Like, what would you like them to feel?
Mm, I would like them to feel as though they've been heard and seen fully, and that they matter, and that their light is needed, however it's going to show up, and that what's possible for one of us is possible for all of us.
Yeah,
And so, really, to take that in and to own that they've done the best they can, they're where they are. And so now they get to choose what's the purpose? What's the purpose of this awareness? It's not to make you feel bad. It's not to find another reason how you're not being perfect.
hmm,
It's instead to show you that you're not alone.
yeah,
And it's to show you what is possible. It's to talk about all the impossible things that happened in my life, whether it be the near-death experiences or, marrying, divorcing, and then remarrying
yes.
my same husband, and having my
Yes.
miracle baby girl, nearly dying,
Oh,
having her, the whole
oh,
thing
wow.
again, right? And
Yes.
those are just stories to show
Yeah.
one person's navigating of this
Sure.
experience,
Sure.
so that it could be a reminder again of what's possible for one is possible for all, in whatever
Yes.
form it is, and to really give themselves the grace to trust the timing
Yeah.
of them finding that book, or the book finding them,
Yeah.
and really knowing that they can always come back to it. It's not one of those things that I hope that they just read once and put down.
Yeah.
I'd like them to come back. And I've had people send me pictures of like
Yeah.
little highlighter marks and, little tabs and different things. And
Sure.
they're going back. And that's what I was hoping. I wanted to include it all together, kind of
Yeah.
like the artist's way, where
Yeah.
they didn't have to, do some kind of upsell at the end of now you need another course to get to be, perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
And instead it was like, no, I'm going to include it in here,
Yes. Yeah.
and I'm gonna show you what I share with my clients. I'm gonna tell you the
Yeah.
stories I've worked with my clients
Yeah.
and their transformations and everything. If you want to
Sure.
do something more than that with me, that's fantastic. But I
Sure.
want you to know it's also enough for you just to
Yeah.
have made the decision to read this book, and hopefully to have this start you on whatever your journey is going to look like.
Yeah. That's amazing. As you were talking, you just validated some other things I saw in your chart too. Yeah. I'm like, this is the chart is the map of your soul. And so
Mm.
it's energy. And it's the experiences that we're meant to have, and so that's why I love it. And one of the things I'm wanting to do with the show is when I have authors on, I want to look at their chart and kind of bring that in, and it's really eye-opening. And you're the first person I've had on that I've really talked about their chart live. I did with my last guest, because I know he's one of my mentors, so I already knew his chart. But
Oh, okay.
I've never, so I'm going to be doing this with all my guests that I have on. And but I definitely wanted to have you on to talk about this. And I'd like to hear, share with us, what's another eighth house experience that you've had, knowing that your
Mhm.
son is there, and it's there's some connections with healing, death, rebirth, transformation, things like that. And also helping other people, and secrets, and trauma, like you talked a little bit about healing trauma and things like that. Maybe some tips, that maybe other eighth house people out there, what helped you really overcome and heal those traumatic situations that you went through?
Well, I'd say what's really helped me the most, the common thread, is again coming from that place of curiosity rather than judgment. And so not denying any part of the experience itself, because I believe that denial is not a spiritual state. and
Yeah.
and so, really looking, but looking without judgment,
Hmm.
looking with gentleness, looking with
Hmm.
curiosity.
Hmm.
And so when you can tell your story
Yeah.
without judgment,
Yeah.
when you can tell your story as though it's your best friend telling your
Hmm.
story, so that now you give that extra grace, you give that extra just space, basically, too, within the story itself. It really shifts things. And so that if you can look at it and see, okay, well, what was the purpose of this? And how can I take the purpose of this and feel empowered by it rather than feel limited by it? What choices are now possible for me because I'm able to look at all of this and see it? And when you do that, then you start to shift your language in how you're communicating with yourself and with others. And so, as a perfectionist, I know for me, and maybe for you too, I'm not going to speak for you, but what I would say is that for me, I used to always say, I think, as the response to anyone asking me a question. That was something that made me feel like, uh-oh, I better get this right. Or, you know, that they're getting nosy, or there's some vulnerability that's going to be breached here unless I put up a wall. So the way that I put up my wall was to act uncertain and to look for validation. So when somebody would say, like, what are you going to write that book, you know, that you've been working on for 7 years or whatever it was, you know, and in the beginning of me writing the book, I would start to say, I think I'm going to finish it maybe in the fall, maybe, you know, and I was always like, I was answering the question with a question because there was that uncertainty. And it was like, well, what kind of answer are you looking for? What can I say to you to make you happy? How can I get you to leave me alone so that I can be visible again, you know, and go up and be in my little cocoon. And because I don't want to feel your judgment, right? I don't want to feel, even if they weren't being judgmental, I didn't want to feel it because I felt like I was under the spotlight and I didn't want to be there. Even though I could speak in front of a crowd of like 500 or 1,000 people, if you get me one-on-one or in a small group and I don't know you very well, or I feel like you're judging me, I don't know what to do. And it's not my comfort zone. And then what shifted though over time, so with writing the book, I actually really began to live the book. And what shifted was that rather than thinking of me writing something new, I had this vision where I could actually see the book finished. And I could see the cover, I could see the you know, the text and everything like that. And it closed in the vision. And then I heard this voice that said, it's already written.
Gotcha.
You only need to choose when to access the memory.
That's really cool. We only
Yeah.
got like 2 minutes. Oh my
Okay.
gosh. Well, I didn't want you to get cut off.
No, but when I heard that though, I shifted the energy of it where I wasn't making something new. I was remembering it. So what I would say to anyone that is looking at their own life and wanting to see what's possible is know that you being on the other side has already happened. And that you're just now going through your experience of remembering what's possible so that you can be gentle with yourself and see yourself no longer as limited or defective, but instead as being whole and complete.
I like that. Can you tell us how people can find your book real quick? We got like a minute or so left. I want to cut off.
Yes,
but
they can go to happilyeverNowBook.com. They can also find my main website at Nancy Reed, NANCIREED.com. And they can find me in the Instaverse at Happily Ever Living or at Nancy Ann Reed.
Nancy Ann Reed. Perfect. We got just less than a minute. I just want to thank you for coming on and encourage everybody out there to get happily ever now, not after everything else is perfect. And get your copy and visit her and follow her. And I just want to thank you for coming on Deep Soul Divers Astrology and sharing your chart with me and your experience. It was powerful, and I'm hoping that the listeners out there, I'm sure they'll enjoy it. And I'm going to share on social media the video and things like that. We can get it out there for our followers and friends. So Mercury retrograde is going on right now, and it played its little games with us today. But we made it, and we got to go live, and I'm so glad it worked out. And so it's so wonderful to have you here, and I can't wait to see what else you're doing. And I'm still thinking about your stories that you shared, and there's
lots more.
I know I'll probably have to have you back on, actually. So
yeah, we should have a virtual coffee.
we will. Thank you, Nancy, for joining Deep Soul Divers Astrology. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next show.
Thanks, Carmen.
Thank you.